So you want to know how to clean a deer head without having to take it to a taxidermist. You're ready to get that head out of the freezer and on a wall where it belongs, but you don't want to spend a fortune and you don't mind getting your hands a little dirty. You just want to avoid a box full of cut off antlers and instead put them on display to preserve those memories for a lifetime. Well, today I'm going to show you how to do just that. In part one, I walked through all the tools I use for this process, but in this video, I'm going to walk through the whole 4-step process of actually creating a European skull mount. I've broken up the video into individual chapters so that it's easier to navigate when you need a quick refresher or you just want to see how I do something. So with that being said, let's get to cleaning. All right, guys, well, assuming that you have had your deer head in the freezer, make sure that you've had it out at least 24 hours. Can be very hard to work with if there are frozen parts of muscle. Make the process much more difficult. So make sure that you've got that head properly thawed, and then you're going to get started. And I like to start just right down the middle on the top between the antlers and cut all the way down to the nose. And for this, I use those fixed blade knives. The sharper, the better, of course. And just kind of work your way around the nose, the cartilage, all that tissue there, and cut away from the sides of that top jaw. Continue to cut around those eye sockets, around the pedicle. You want to really get that knife close to that pedicle because there's a lot of cartilage and fatty tissue right there underneath the base of the antler. And then do the same thing on the underside, skin back everything on that bottom jaw. Work your way around to the ears, and the ears, they cut through. There's cartilage there, but they cut through pretty quickly and pretty easily. And then usually there is a little bit of neck meat, a couple of vertebrae. Sometimes when you're cutting that head off, you don't realize quite how much you're leaving on there, but just make sure you get that off. It's pretty easy to kind of feel around and remove what you need to remove. And then I like to turn the skull over and remove the tongue. And so just cut down the inside of that jaw, the bottom jaw, and the tongue will start to move around. You can kind of pull it through, and then you work your way, and part of that's attached to the trachea. But remove as much meat as you can around those jaws on the inside and the outside, and then you'll find kind of like a little wishbone in there. And just make sure you remove as much as you can, and it makes breaking that bottom jaw much easier. But go ahead and remove the bottom jaw. There's no reason to leave it on there. If you want to age your deer, you can go ahead and take it off and set that to the side. And then you're going to make your way to the eye sockets. It's kind of gross, and the first couple of times you do this, it may bother you a little bit, but after a while, it just becomes just another organ. But there's a lot of tissue in there. There's some fat behind the eyeballs, and where it attaches to where it goes down to the brain. I just like to do as much as I can on the front side. It makes the rest of the process a lot easier. And so you can just see that I'm kind of working my way around, looking for all those large portions of fat and tissue and cartilage. Get all that done, and then you will be ready for the boil. All right, so step 2 is to get ready to boil this thing. And so you're going to want to wrap those antlers real tight. I start at the pedicle and actually go just below that. You want to avoid losing any of that original color. It can be hard to do, especially your first few times. But just make sure you wrap it over and over and over again. Wrap it real tight, and then take your electrical tape. And just know this is something I've changed several times. But right now, what I like to do is to wrap it 3 times. I just want to make sure that it stays on there as good as possible, because when things really start to heat up, everything, even the electrical tape, it starts to loosen up. So just work your way around. Get everything on there nice and snug, and it'll be ready for the boil. So then you'll see me adding the OxyClean. It's just about a scoop. I do recommend going ahead and bringing the water to a boil before you put the skull in. I didn't do that here, but it takes a while to get that much water to come to a boil. Once the water is boiling, turn it down just a little bit to a simmer. You don't want it to boil over. Make sure that the pedicle is below the water line, about 1 inch. And it's really not about how long it's in there. It's really what you're seeing happen with the tissue. And this is something that takes some time to get right. About 20 minutes is really enough. Much more than that, and it begins to cause the bone to get real brittle and it'll split apart. Next, you'll see where I use a simple flathead screwdriver. And this is something you don't have to do, but there's a bone and then just a lot of cartilage and tissue that sits down in there that you just can't reach with a pressure washer or with a knife. I've just found it to be a lot better to reach in there with that screwdriver and kind of pry a little bit, and it begins to pop up. You'll just see a whole lot of meat and tissue come out of there that you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. And then there's just a soft plate below that, and that's where I use that drill and paddle bit. It's super easy to do, but once you puncture that, you don't have to go any farther. You just want to create that small hole in there. That's typically not a part of the skull that you're going to see when you display it. And it just allows you to get in there and do some cleaning, which you'll see in just a little bit. So then it's ready for step 3, for the cleaning stage. And so this is where you have to be really careful. I use a simple electric pressure washer, about 2100 PSI, but once you're spraying, it probably drops down to 18 or 1900. It's not super strong, but you don't need it to be in order to accomplish this. And you don't need to use the highest pressure nozzle either. Just use one that is gonna knock that tissue and that meat away. And this is where you're gonna do as much as you can. And you can see where I spray in there into that brain cavity, and everything begins to come out the sides where I've made those extra holes. And you're just gonna make your way around, being real careful of the base of those antlers. Now you can spray right up underneath them because there's a lot of tissue under there, but just be real careful not to spray too much onto the antlers, or it will whiten it very quickly and remove a lot of that natural color. So you can see I'm wearing that lovely outfit with the rubber boots, but man, I just learned real quick that this makes a big difference, especially when you're doing multiple heads at a time. So this was really the first washing, but then I'm gonna take those forceps and I'm gonna reach in there in every crack and crevice I can and try to remove as much of the remaining tissue as I can. And so there's kind of a lining from the inside of the brain cavity, and so you'll reach in there, and it takes some finagling a little bit to get that to come out, but reach behind those eye sockets, and there's some meat in there that you'll want to remove. Now you'll see I'm using the forceps in the nasal cavity, and I remove those nasal, I think they're turbinates. A lot of people like to leave those. For me though, that I just found doing it this way with the pressure washing, it's just a lot easier to get that tissue out of there by removing all that cartilage and the extra bone that's in there, that fine bone that's in there. There can be so much, and you'll see this even after the cleaning and the washing and everything, you'll see that there's a lot left in there. And then you'll see I take off the plastic wrap, and then I do spray the antlers, but from a distance, because there is a good bit of extra meat and tissue on the outside of those antlers that can really smell bad. You can leave it on there. You'll need to let it dry for several days in order to kind of decompose. But I like to just take some of that off, and it makes it a little bit easier. Finally, step 4, the whitening process, and that's where I take that hydrogen peroxide, 40 volume. I put on those gloves that are chemical resistant, and then I use that plastic dish to put them in. And then I literally just pour enough on there that I can kind of work it around, being real careful of the antlers. But outside of the antlers, you want it on every nook and cranny that you can get it on, because it's going to help continue to clean it. It's going to dissolve a lot of that, the last little bit of residue. It's going to help bleach it really well, get it down in the brain cavity, everywhere you can, just kind of work it around. You'll see with one hand I hold the antler, the other one I've got gloved up, and I just keep kind of, picking it up, scooping it up, pouring it in, scooping it up, pouring it in, and then the teeth as well. Well, next you can see this is after 24 hours. Okay, so I've left it for 24 hours. It's really white, and you can actually remove it at this stage, but oftentimes the teeth still have a good bit of stuff left on them. I just like to leave it in for another 24 hours, 48 hours altogether. I find that that's kind of the sweet spot. Gets it real nice and clean, looking really good. But then when you're ready, after 48 hours, you just take a light wash, clean it all out, get all that peroxide off of there. rinse it real good, and it's gonna be pretty much ready to go. Well, once you're done rinsing it real well, getting all the peroxide off of there, I recommend hanging it somewhere to let it dry, even put it in front of a fan, but you want it to really dry out. The longer you leave it out, the better, because it's just gonna make sure that more of that tissue has time to decompose and to get that smell out of there. Take a little bit of that mop-in glow and brush it onto the skull. Helps kind of seal it up and keeps dust from getting on top of it. You can even put it on the antlers. It doesn't do anything to it other than gives it just a little bit of a light matte sheen. So it's not too shiny, it doesn't look strange, but man, it just really helps it pop. And then it's ready for the wall. Well, hey, now it's your turn. If you want to hear me walk through all the tools I use, you can check out this video right here. Otherwise, thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.